You know that feeling, right? You turn the wheel on your RC car, feels like the right amount,
Yeah.
but the car just keeps going wide. That sort of pushing sensation.
Or the opposite, maybe even more startling, where the back end suddenly decides it wants to lead the way, slides right out.
Exactly. That's understeer and oversteer. And today, we're really going to dive deep into the Tamiya world, figure out these handling quirks, and, help you get a handle on them.
Yeah, think of this as your fast track to understanding what's really going on when your Tamiya isn't quite doing what you expect in the corners.
We want to equip you, the listener, with the know-how to spot if it's understeer or oversteer.
And not just spot it, but understand why it's happening. And crucially, what you can actually do about it. How to tune your car so it handles just right.
Okay, so let's break it down. Two main things we're looking at. First up, understeer.
Right. That's when the car turns less than you tell it to. It feels tight is another word people use, or pushes.
And the key thing here, technically speaking, is the front tires lose grip before the rear ones do.
Precisely. Then the opposite is oversteer.
That's the tail-happy one, where the rear swings out more than you intended. Feels loose.
And in that case, it's the rear tires giving up a ghost first. They lose traction before the fronts.
Understanding those two, that difference, it's really the first big step to mastering your Tamiya, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely fundamental. So let's dig into understeer a bit more. What does it actually feel like from the driver's perspective?
Well, for me, the steering often feels a bit vague, almost light, like the front wheels aren't really biting.
Yeah, that's a great description. You find yourself adding more steering lock, turning the wheel more and more, but the car just isn't tightening its line like you expect.
It's resisting. It just wants to take a wider path.
Exactly. It's stubbornly going wide. You could have the wheel cranked way over, and it only sort of gradually changes direction.
Super frustrating when you're trying to hit an apex. So what usually causes this push? What's going on?
Well, several things can trigger it. Probably the most common one, just going too fast into the corner. Simple as that sometimes.
Asking too much of the front tires.
Exactly. They hit their limit of grip and they start to slide sideways instead of turning the car.
Okay, go ahead.
Another big one, especially with front-wheel drive cars or some four-wheel drives, is being too aggressive on the throttle too early in the turn.
Ah, so powering out mid-corner.
Yeah, that sudden power delivery just overwhelms the front tires, the ones doing the steering and putting power down. They lose traction.
Makes sense. Anything else driver-related?
Hard braking while you're already turning can do it too. If you lock up the front wheels, well, a locked wheel can't steer, can it?
Good point. And jerky steering inputs probably don't help either.
Definitely not. Abrupt inputs can shock the tires past their grip limit. Smoothness is key.
Okay, so managing speed, being smooth on the controls.
Yeah.
But what if you feel like you're driving smoothly and it's still pushing wide?
Then it's time to look at the car itself. The setup. The mechanical reason is usually an imbalance. The front end just doesn't have enough grip compared to the rear.
So the car's natural balance is biased towards understeer.
Right. Could be tires, suspension settings. We'll get into the tuning details later. But it's interesting, some manufacturers, and Tamiya probably does this with their beginner kits, they actually design in a bit of understeer on purpose.
Really? Why would they do that?
Well, think about it from a stability perspective. For someone new to RC, a car that gently pushes wide when you overcook it is generally much easier to control than one that suddenly snaps sideways into oversteer.
Ah, I see. It's more forgiving, predictable, maybe.
Exactly. It's seen as a safer, more stable default handling trait. Prioritizes ease of driving over ultimate knife-edge cornering speed.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially for kits aimed at first-timers. So understeer. Car not turning enough, often too much speed or not enough front grip. Let's flip it. Oversteer. What's the sensation there?
Oversteer feels, much more dramatic usually. You feel the rear of the car get light. It feels like it wants to pivot, around the front wheel.
The tail wanting to wag the dog.
Perfect analogy. The back end starts swinging outwards, rotating the car more sharply than you intended. It feels loose.
And if you don't catch it quick.
Spin City. Yeah, it can escalate into a full spin pretty fast if you don't countersteer or manage the throttle correctly.
Sounds definitely more challenging than understeer, particularly if you're not expecting it. What typically triggers that loose feeling?
A really common one, especially with rear-wheel drive cars or even powerful four-wheel drives, is too much throttle too soon or too suddenly in the corner.
Flooring it midterm.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That surge of power just breaks the rear tires loose. They start spinning instead of gripping laterally.
Okay. What else causes the rear to step out?
Another classic is abruptly lifting off the throttle mid-corner. People call it lift-off oversteer.
Why does lifting off cause it?
Because the weight suddenly shifts forward, right?
Yes.
That unloads the rear tires, reduces their grip, makes them much more likely to slide, especially in rear wheel or rear engine cars where there's already less weight up front.
Ah, the weight transfer. Got it. And braking.
Heavy braking can do it too, yeah. Especially if the brake bias is too much towards the rear, or if the braking itself causes a big weight shift forward, again, unloading those rear tires.
So again, seems like smooth control inputs are really important. What about setup factors that make a car prone to oversteer?
Just like with understeer, it often comes down to an imbalance in grip. But this time, it's the rear end lacking grip relative to the front.
So maybe the rear suspension is too stiff, or the rear tires are harder than the fronts.
Exactly. Things like that. Stiff rear suspension might not let the tires follow the track surface well, or, mismatched tire compounds. But here's the interesting bit. While it's tricky for beginners, skilled drivers sometimes use controlled oversteer.
Right, like for drifting or getting the car rotated quickly in a tight hairpin.
Precisely. They intentionally induce a bit of that loose feeling to help them turn tighter or faster. It takes skill, though.
Definitely. Okay, so we have understeer pushing wide, front grip loss, and oversteer rear steps out, rear grip loss. The ideal, presumably, is finding that sweet spot, that balance. What are the big things influencing which way a car tends to go?
Yeah, that handling balance is, it's a mix of a few key things interacting. First off, and maybe easy to forget, is just driving style.
How you actually use the controls.
Exactly. Smooth steering, throttle, braking. That helps keep the car stable, keeps the weight transfer predictable. Aggressive, jerky inputs, that's asking for trouble. It upsets the balance, makes it easy to trigger either understeer or oversteer.
Finesse over force, like you said, makes total sense. What else is in the mix?
Well, the biggest one for us hobbyists, the thing we can actually change and play with, is the car setup. This is where tuning comes in.
All those adjustments.
Everything. Tires, compound, inserts, tread, suspension, geometry, camber, caster, toe angles, shocks, oil, pistons, springs, anti-roll bars, diffs, how they're built or set, weight distribution, where the battery goes, adding ballast, even ride height. All of it impacts handling.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot to potentially adjust.
It is. And that's the fun of it, right? Learning what does what. Then there's the track or surface conditions.
Right. Driving on carpet is totally different from dirt.
Totally. The grip level dictates so much. High grip carpet needs a different setup than loose dirt or bumpy grass. Temperature, dust. It all affects grip, meaning you might need to tweak your setup to suit.
And you mentioned these factors interact.
Hugely interconnected. That's the key thing to grasp. You might make a change to fix understeer on corner entry.
And suddenly find you've got oversteer on the exit.
Exactly. Or maybe it makes the car unstable down the straight, like say you soften the front springs to get more front bite. That might work, but maybe the car now rolls too much.
So you lose overall grip unless you also adjust the anti-roll bars or shock damping to compensate.
Precisely. Tuning isn't just fixing one problem, it's finding that harmony, that overall balance that works for your driving style on that surface. A car that's fast, but also consistent and easy to drive near the limit.
A holistic approach. Finding the equilibrium. Okay, let's bring Tamiya into this more directly. They've been around forever, shaping RC. How has handling evolved across their chassis generations? Let's trace that lineage.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey. Tamiya's range is incredible, and each era really shows the tech, the design thinking, and what the cars were for at the time. Let's start way back. Vintage icons, roughly, 76 to the mid-80s.
The classics. Sand Scorcher, Rough Rider.
Yeah.
Well, what would they like to drive?
Iconic looks, incredible scale detail, but handling. On grippy surfaces, the SRB chassis Sand Scorcher Rough Rider had pretty significant understeer.
Why was that?
Mostly down to the solid rear axle. Both rear wheels have to turn at the same speed, right? Makes it hard to rotate sharply on tarmac or carpet.
Ah, like a go-kart.
Kind of, yeah. And they also love to roll over. High center of gravity, suspension geometry that often had positive camber tops of the tires leaning out. Not ideal for corner and grip.
But they were meant for sand, right?
Yeah, exactly. On loose stuff, they were more in their element, more manageable. But the design philosophy then was clearly scale looks and ruggedness over pure handling performance.
Form over function, in a way. What about the monster trucks? The ORV chassis, Monster Beetle, Blackfoot. They look like they'd handle differently.
Oh, they did. Differently is putting it mildly. ORVs were famous for being incredibly bouncy. Suspension was basic, Damping almost non-existent.
So, not great control.
Not really, and they had a real tendency to spin out oversteer, especially on loose dirt. And just like the SRBs, rollover was practically a feature, thanks to that high CG. Even braking could be sketchy. Sometimes they just swap ends.
Sounds chaotic.
It was. High CG, basic suspension, controlled handling was a real challenge.
Yeah.
Despite that, or maybe because of it, they had this massive fun factor and just wild machines.
Thrills over precision, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's round out that vintage era. Early 2WD buggies, Grasshopper, Hornet, Frog.
Right, the Grasshopper and Hornet were the entry point for many. Simple, affordable, pretty bouncy, limited grip overall.
Can handle it.
The Hornet, having a bit more poke from its motor, tended towards oversteer. You stab the throttle, the back end comes around. On really high grip, maybe some understeer if the front tires just gave up. Very basic suspension. The Frog, though, was a step up.
How so?
Independent suspension all around, handled noticeably better than the Grasshopper or Hornet. Still could oversteer if you pushed it, but more controlled. These buggies, with their obvious handling traits, were where a lot of people first started tinkering, learning how setup affects driving. Kind of a gateway drug to tuning.
Yeah, you could really feel the difference between them.
Okay, let's shift eras. Classic contenders, late 80s to late 90s. Things are getting more performance-focused now.
Definitely. We see proper touring cars emerge, the M chassis minis.
Yeah.
Yeah, a different game. Let's start with the TA series touring cars. TAs-01, TAs-02.
Early four-wheel drive, how did they handle?
The TA-01 could be quite prone to oversteer, especially if you dropped in a hot motor or used a body with a high CG. Could lead to snap spins, even those dramatic rolling crashes.
Ouch. Was the TA-02 better? Improved, yes, but still could suffer from oversteer, especially with a soft setup or high CG body. The takeaway is that just having 4WD didn't magically solve all handling issues back then. Weight balance, suspension design were still huge factors.
What caused that oversteer?
Several things. The TA-01 could be a bit rear-heavy depending on the layout. Stock rear uprights had fixed toe-in, which usually helps stability. But under power, if one wheel lost traction, it could sometimes promote a spin. Suspension was simpler than later cars.
Any quirks?
Actually, yeah. The Hummer version on that same platform apparently had loads of bump steer engineered in, maybe to try and calm down the oversteer tendency. And the standard open diffs meant inside wheel spin in corners, which doesn't help stability.
Interesting. So they were versatile, but maybe not perfectly honed for racing out of the box. What about the early M chassis? M01, M02, M03, M04, those little guys.
Ugh, the minis. A totally different vibe. The M01, the first FWD one, short wheelbase. It was nimble, sure, but pretty unstable. Prone to understeer, especially powering out of corners. Old school horizontal friction dampers didn't help much either.
And the M03.
M03, also FWD, was better. Proper vertical shocks. But still, fundamentally understeer bias because of the front-wheel drive.
Then the rear-wheel drives,
Yeah.
M02 and M04.
Yep, M02 and M04, RWD, short wheelbase motor in the back. Generally tended towards oversteer. Could be quite twitchy, a real handful for some drivers to lap consistently.
So FWD versus RWD was the defining factor there.
Absolutely. Drivetrain, wheelbase, weight distribution. Those dictated the core handling. They were more about scale fun and racing on tight technical tracks than outright stability, perhaps.
Makes sense. And Tamiya also did a front-wheel drive touring car, right? The FF chassis, FF01.
They did, the FF1. Being FWD, its natural tendency was understeer. You'd feel it push wide, especially on throttle.
Any other traits?
Potential for that lift-off oversteer we talked about. Lift suddenly mid-corner, weight shifts forward off the driven wheels, back end could get light. It was all about that front weight bias inherent in FWD. Tamiya exploring different layouts for touring cars.
Okay, so the classic era really expanded at the types of handling we saw. Let's jump to the modern performers, late 90s to now. More focus on tuning and performance here.
For sure. Wider range, too, from super accessible entry-level stuff to full-on race machines. Let's start with the king of entry-level, the TT platform, TT01, TT02.
Everyone knows the TT-802. What's the stock handling like? Straight out of the box.
Typically pretty strong understeer, which as we discussed makes it forgiving for beginners. Easy to drive, doesn't bite back too hard.
But maybe limits outright speed?
Yeah, for experienced drivers wanting sharp cornering, that understeer can be frustrating. Also, the shaft drive can sometimes cause a bit of torque steer, pulling slightly to one side under power, especially with faster motors.
And the steering feel?
Stock steering often has noticeable slop, play in the linkages. Feels imprecise, which can make the understeer feel even worse. The design priority is definitely ease of use, cost, durability over pinpoint precision.
What's behind those traits, technically?
It's built for affordability. Basic materials, simple components, standard tires and shocks are fine for bashing, but not high grip or sophisticated damping. Open diffs allow inside wheel spin, contributing to that push.
But people upgrade them like crazy, right?
Absolutely, and that's the genius of the TT platform. It's a fantastic learning tool, huge range of hop-ups available. You can upgrade step by step, feel the difference each part makes, and really learn about tuning. It's like RC tuning school in a box.
A blank canvas for learning. Cool.
Yeah.
What about the modern M chassis? They've evolved too. MO5, MO6, MO7, MO8.
Big time. The MO5 FWD still have that inherent understeer tendency. It can feel a bit bouncy stock, maybe some steering slop. The MO6 RWD, with the motor out back, naturally leans towards oversteer. Front end can feel light, needs precise input. Longer wheelbase options help calm it down, though.
And the newer MO7 and MO8.
They're a real step up. Better materials, much more adjustable. The MO7 FWD is known for being surprisingly neutral and responsive for a front driver. The MO8 RWD offers more controlled, predictable oversteer. More engaging, maybe. Tamiya's really refined the M chassis balance between fun and performance.
It sounds like they really nailed the balance on those later ones. What about the brand new multi-layout one, the MB01?
Yeah, the MB01. Interesting concept. FWD or RWD, different wheelbases, all from one kit. Because of that, handling really depends on how you build it.
But initial reactions?
Some early feedback has been a bit mixed, actually. Suggestions that maybe in some configs it's not quite as refined as, say, an MO5 or MO6 out of the box. Maybe a wider turning circle than expected. Seems like creating that much versatility might involve some handling compromises in certain modes.
Interesting trade-offs. Okay, shifting to off-road scale stuff. The CC chassis, CC01, CC02.
Right, the cross-country chassis. The CC01 is legendary for scale builds, but also kind of infamous for pretty bad understeer and massive steering slop, that bell crank system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not built for speed or precision cornering.
And the newer CC02.
CC02 is a more modern ladder frame, likely better overall, but still the focus is 100% scale looks and off-road capability, not track handling. A good handling here means crawling over rocks, staying stable on trails.
Context is everything. Okay, finally, the top tier. TRF series, Tamiya Racing Factory.
TRF, these are the competition machines. Handling, typically neutral, super responsive, highly tunable. Any under or oversteer you see on a TRF car is almost certainly deliberate, a setup choice by an expert driver for a specific track.
Not an inherent flaw.
Exactly. High-end materials, precision engineering, advanced suspension, everything's optimized. They're the benchmark, the platform for Tamiya's latest tech.
Wow, quite the journey across Tamiya's history. Okay, the big question now. How do we actually master our own Tamiyas, fix that understeer, tame that oversteer? Let's get into the tuning guide.
Right. Let's talk practical fixes. No matter which Tamiya you have, the basic ideas are the same. It's all about managing grip front versus rear and controlling weight transfer. Cornering, accelerating, braking, it all shifts weight and affects grip.
Where's the best place to start? The absolute first thing to look at.
Tires. Always tires. They are the connection to the surface. Nothing else matters if the tires aren't right.
Compound tread pattern.
All of it. Compound. Softer usually means more grip, harder less. Tread. Slicks for smooth, patterns for loose or wet. Getting that right for your surface is job one.
How does that relate to under oversteer?
Well, say you have understeer, you need more front grip, right? So maybe try softer front tires, or if you have oversteer, maybe softer rears or harder fronts. Balancing front-rear tire hardness is fundamental.
What about inserts?
Crucial. Inserts support the tire, control how it deforms, affects the contact patch, how it handles bumps, even things like tire diameter, using tire additives like traction compound in racing and just proper cleaning and break-in. It all adds up. You see it all the time. With the TT02, people immediately ask, what tires are you running when troubleshooting handling?
Right, foundation first. Okay, tires sorted. What about the wheels themselves? The angles? Suspension geometry camber, caster, toe?
Huge impact here. Let's take camber. That's the tilt of the tire, top in or out, viewed from the front.
Negative camber is top tilted in, right?
Correct. And generally, more negative camber gives more cornering grip because it keeps more of the tire flat on the ground as the chassis rolls. So to reduce understeer, maybe try a bit more negative camber up front.
Makes sense. What about caster?
Caster is the angle of the steering pivot viewed from the side, affects stability, steering feel. More caster can sometimes help reduce mid-corner to exit understeer, makes the steering feel more progressive.
And toe, pointing in or out.
Toe. Front toe out, fronts pointing slightly away from each other, can make turn in sharper. potentially reducing initial understeer. Rear toe in, rears pointing slightly towards each other, is common for stability, helps reduce oversteer.
And you can even adjust how camber changes as the suspension moves.
Yeah, by changing camber link positions. That adjusts camber gain, affecting grip through the corner. So yeah, small angle changes make a big difference in feel.
Okay, subtle adjustments, big effects. Now, controlling the suspension movement itself. Shocks and springs.
The dynamic duo. Shocks, or dampers, control the speed of suspension movement. Springs control the amount of movement supporting the car and managing roll.
Shock oil weight is key.
Big time.
Mm.
Shock oil weight, viscosity controls damping. Lighter oil lets the shock move faster. Maybe slightly lighter oil in the front shocks can help weight transfer forward on corner entry, improving turn-in, reducing understeer.
And springs. Stiffer or softer?
Spring rate stiffness affects roll. Softer front springs or stiffer rear springs can shift the grip balance forward, again helping reduce understeer. But don't forget shock angle on the towers and droop how far the suspension drops down. Those also tweak weight transfer and grip. The key is synergy. Springs and dampers have to work together.
A matched pair. Got it.
Yeah.
What about those bars linking the suspension side to side? Anti-roll bars? Sway
Try
units?
anti-roll bars. They're basically springs that resist chassis roll in corners. They connect left and right sides.
How do they affect grip balance?
A stiffer bar on one end reduces roll at that end, but it also makes the tires on that end lose a bit of grip relative to the other end. So to reduce understeer, you want relatively more front grip. So maybe try a softer front anti-roll bar or a stiffer rear one.
And the opposite for oversteer.
Yeah.
Stiffer front, softer rear.
Exactly. They're a great tuning tool for fine-tuning that roll stiffness and grip balance between the front and rear axles.
Okay, let's talk power delivery. Differential tuning. How does that play in?
Diffs are critical. They let wheels on the same axle turn at different speeds and corners. How they're set up open, oil-filled, ball diff, spool, locked. One-way massively changes handling, especially under power or braking.
How does front diff tuning affect understeer?
Generally, a looser front diff helps steering off power, can reduce corner entry understeer. A tighter front diff gives more on-power pull out of corners, but might increase understeer, especially mid-corner.
And the rear diff.
A looser rear diff allows more rotation, can increase oversteer tendency. A tighter rear diff adds stability, reduces wheel spin, but might cause understeer when you get on the power. You can even use things like a front one-way diff, which lets front wheels freewheel off power for maximum steering into a corner. It's all about managing how power gets split during cornering.
Sounds like diffs are key for balancing power and rotation.
Yeah.
What about just the car's overall balance? Weight distribution.
Crucial. Where the weight sits matters. Shifting weight forward generally increases front grip, helps reduce understeer. Moving weight back increases rear grip, can reduce oversteer.
How do you do that? Battery position.
Yeah, moving the battery, ESC, receiver, or even adding small ballast weight strategically. Also, lowering the overall center of gravity, CG, is almost always good. Improves stability, reduces roll, makes the car more responsive.
And finally, how low the car sits. Ride height.
Ride height affects CG, roll center, suspension geometry, even aerodynamics at speed. Lower is generally more stable. You can also tune the rake the difference between front and rear ride height. Slightly lower front than rear can help turn in, reduce understeer by shifting weight forward dynamically.
And wings and bodies.
Yeah.
Aerodynamics.
Yep, if your car has them. Wings add rear downforce at speed, which is great for reducing high-speed oversteer. Body shells themselves can have aero effects too.
Wow, okay. That's a comprehensive toolkit.
Yeah.
Let's apply some of this. How would you approach taming those vintage beasts? SRB, ORV?
Right, the SRB. That's solid axle understeer on grip. A ball diff helps massively if you're not running on sand. Good shocks are essential. Proper damping makes a huge difference. Maybe an alloy chassis for stiffness? Modern tires on adapters give way more grip. Upgrading the vague steering helps too, maybe even a gyro for stability. And playing with weight to counter that rear bias.
And the bouncy, rollover-prone ORV.
Oil shocks are a must. Maybe lighter oil up front, softer springs. Lower profile tires help lower the CG, reduce rollover risk, limit suspension travel a bit, add weight down low. Upgrade the mushy servo saver. Kimbrough is popular. Maybe an MIP ball diff for the gearbox. Brace the gearbox. Ensure drive shafts are phased right. It's about mitigating that high CG and basic suspension. For both vintage types, it's that balance. Keep the charm versus chase modern handling.
Definitely a labor of love for those old ones. How about refining the classic chassis, TA0102, early M chassis, FS01?
TA0102, often fighting oversteer. Good oil shocks and spring tuning are key. Ball or oil diffs instead of the stock open ones. Adjustable rear toe and uprights help stability. Adjustable camber links too. Better steering parts to remove slop. Maybe sway bars. Modern tires make a huge difference. Some people even put TAZO2 arms on a TAZO1.
And the early M chassis like the MO3 FWD.
MO3 Understeer, a ball diff is almost mandatory. Oil shocks, good M-spec race tires, maybe a stiffer rear sway bar, adjustable upper arms for camber tuning, high torque servo saver, universals. Playing with weight balance.
And the FWD touring car, the FSO1.
Similar story for its understeer. Ball diff crucial. Oil shock springs. High grip front tires are essential. Maybe a front sway bar. Hardened out drives can be useful too. Basically maximizing front end grip.
Sounds like diffs and shocks are common themes there. Okay, modern platforms. Optimizing the TT02, MO5, MO6, CC01.
The TT02. Understeer. Steering slop. Step 1. Steering upgrades. Aluminum bell cranks, adjustable links, aluminum servo horn. Huge difference. Then oil shocks. Play with springs, maybe softer front, stiffer rear, adjustable upper arms. Diff tuning, thicker oil up front, maybe even a spool, or looser oil ball diff in the rear. Aluminum prop shaft joints. And good tires, always good tires. It's a perfect tuning classroom.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
MO5 FWD. Still fighting understeer.
Pretty much. Bearings throughout. Oil shocks. Ball or oil diff. High torque servo favor. Universals. Adjustable arms. Proper M tires. Aluminum steering parts help slop. Carbon stays for stiffness. Weight balance is key.
And the MO6 RWD. Taming oversteer.
Usually, yeah. Tire choice is critical. Maybe softer rears, different compound fronts. Softer rear springs, stiffer fronts, lighter front shock oil, heavier rear. Maybe add weight up front. Stiffer rear sway bar sometimes helps. Diff tuning, thicker grease, oil, or a ball diff. Longer wheelbase setting improves stability. Aluminum rear uprights for adjustable toe-in. Transmitter expo can help smooth steering input.
Lots of options for the MO6. And the CC01 for scale trails.
Steering slop is the big one. Aftermarket steering kits, GPM, yeah, racing, hot racing, almost essential. Softer, grippier trail tires. Rear four-link conversion improves articulation hugely. Softer shock oil springs, DT02 red springs are popular. Front universals if you add lots of steering angle. Maybe a crawler motor. Lock the diffs for serious off-roading. It needs mods, but can become very capable.
Clear paths for improvement on those modern kits.
Yeah.
Lastly, TRF chassis. Fine-tuning, not fixing, right?
Exactly. It's not about flaws, it's optimization. Tiny changes. Roll center adjustments with shims inserts. Minute shock oil piston spring changes. Tweaking diff oil viscosity or ball diff settings. Sway bar thickness or position. Shifting tiny weights. Playing with Ackermann geometry, fractions of a degree on camber caster toe.
It's a different world.
It is. TRF design focuses on symmetry, low CG, efficient drivetrains. Tuning is about marginal gains for expert drivers. Analyzing data, feeling tiny differences. Advanced stuff like optimizing aero with ride height wing tweaks, dynamic toe changes, ultrafine damper tuning. It's chasing that last tenth of a second.
Incredible level of detail. Okay, we have covered a ton today. From basic understeer oversteer definitions to deep dives on specific Tamiya chassis and tuning. Let's try and wrap up with the main takeaways.
Yeah, the key things really are understeer, front grip loss, car pushes wide, oversteer, rear grip loss, tail steps out. The goal is usually balanced grip, front and rear.
And getting there isn't instant, is it?
Definitely not. Tuning is iterative. Patience is key. Change one thing at a time. Test it. See what happens. Kit setups are just starting points. You got to experiment, keep track of what works for you.
It's a journey of discovery, really. Hands-on learning.
Exactly. And that's where Tamiya shines. Such a huge range of chassis, tons of upgrades. It's an amazing platform for learning about handling. Honestly, figuring out why your car's doing something weird and then tuning it so it drives perfectly. That satisfaction is a huge part of the fun in this hobby.
Totally agree. Becoming one with the machine, understanding how it talks back through the controls. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. For all you listeners, here's something to chew on. Thinking about all those Tamiya eras we discussed, the vintage icons, the classic contenders, the modern performers, which era with its specific handling challenges and tuning solutions do you feel best captures that core experience of learning to truly master RC car control? And what does that tell us about how RC tech has evolved and why we enthusiasts keep chasing that perfect lap, that perfect drive? Good question to ponder. Give that some thought. Until our next deep dive, happy driving, everyone.